sound problem solved. And I'm going to just go back over what I had talked about because I don't think you could hear me. So if you want to paint along with me today, go ahead and go down below in the description down below. And I have images, I have a reference image and 2 sketches for you to download. You can just save the reference photo to your phone if you want to save some printer ink, but all those are down below. And let's see. What else can I tell you? This feed will last about an hour and 15 minutes, I think, if we don't have any more problems with our technical difficulties. I think we've got that covered now. And if you're here in the chat room with me, go ahead and say hi. The chat room should be to the right of your video screen or down below. Let me know where you're tuning in from. And let's see. The supplies that I'll be using tonight are, I'll be using these colors, but I'm using watercolor tonight, and I don't have an expensive pad of paper. It's just a Canson pad. And I will be using pinks and oranges and yellows tonight and a little bit of blue, along with a Payne's Gray color, which the color I'm using is called Sodalite. But if you have Payne's Gray, that's great too. And yeah, let's see. I'm going to show you what we're going to be painting. So this was the original painting that we were going to be painting, and I actually did 2 versions, so you'll see that here in a moment. And the sketches that you will be downloading will look like this. So you can color along with me if you'd like, or go ahead and transfer that to your watercolor paper. I print mine out, and then I just take a pencil and I scrape the lead across the back, and then obviously then I can tape it down to my watercolor paper and just trace it that way. You can use a window if you have light out still, which it's still light out where I am, or you can just sketch it out on your own. So any is fine. Okay. And I actually included another image. Let's see. Oh, let's see. That's your... Well, maybe I didn't include it. Anyhow, there's a second image down below that's actually of flamingos, little flamingos like this, that you can color or you can transfer them as well. So, all right. Sorry for all the commotion this evening. We'll get there. So let's get started. And as you can see, if you didn't hear me before, I have 2 different flamingos that I painted, and I kind of like this one better. And so I think we're going to use the colors from this one and have a little fun. Okay. So first what you have to do is you have to have a couple of water receptacles here to rinse out your brushes. And I'm going to be using Opera Pink. I'm going to be mixing Opera Pink, which is this bright pink color, and then I'm going to be using kind of a warm yellow. Now this has pink in here, so that isn't the best representation of that color, but I'm going to mix those 2 when I start painting my flamingo. I'm also going to be mixing some, let's see if I can do this, scooch this over so you can see it. I'm also going to be mixing some blue. So here I'm going to be putting some pink in here. This is my hot pink color. It's an opera color. You can use a quinacridone coral if that's what you have. It's a really beautiful color, and it's perfect for flamingos. And then I'm going to take some of my warm yellow. I'm actually going to put it in the tray next to it, because sometimes I like to drop that in wet into wet. A little bit more water. So you see, mixing these 2 actually creates this kind of really vibrant orange color. It's kind of a peachy peachy color. And you want to mix enough paint and water that you can do the whole neck of this flamingo. And if you've followed along before, I call it my round robin technique. So what I like to do is paint one area and move into an entirely different area so the first area can dry a little bit. And so we'll be doing that a little bit tonight so we can make the most of our time here tonight. So I'm liking this color that this has turned out to be. And over here I have an iPad that has my image in it, so I can use my reference image here. It's always good to use an image for reference. This is actually a photo that I took when we were in San Diego a couple years ago. We were in SeaWorld and the zoos down there, and got some great photographs. So I'm getting some paper towel here because I always drip on my paper here and my water is over here. You can't see it off camera, but in an effort to make less of a mess. That's what I'm doing. And I'm also going to load 2 brushes with paint. I'm going to load this brush, which is, it's a size 10, so it's a pretty good size brush. And then this brush, all the numbers are off of it, but it's probably a 4 because I'm going to try to get into some of these tight spaces that this big brush is just too large for. So those spaces are going to be this area here. And if you're one of my students, you've probably heard me say this a lot, but I had a college professor that taught me how to move the bead. So you see this little bead of water here. We want to move it along, and the reason we want to do that is so it doesn't leave marks in our paper. We can have a nice smooth gradient if we keep moving that bead along. So now I can use my bigger brush and start moving the bead, and if I need to, I'm adding, you can see more here, this is the bead. And I'm going to try to move pretty quickly just so it doesn't dry too fast for me. Sometimes it does dry pretty fast on me. I'm just moving that along the neck here, just so I can have hope to have an even wash. So you always want to use a larger brush for a larger area if you can. And you want to mix enough paint and water to be able to fill the space that you need to fill. So I'm filling my big brush again and my little brush. So I have a tight squeeze here. And if you have questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I will periodically be looking up to see if there are any questions. And I'm just actually going to go all the way through to here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm rinsing out my brushes. I'm going to lift a little bit of the color to show the lighting that you might see in your reference photo. And how I do that is I clean out my brush and then I pat it on my paper napkin, and then you can see I'm going to take that brush along the side here and that will lift pigment, and it's effective if this is really wet, and it's sort of drying on me now. I'm going to do that over here too. You'll also hear me talking about softening edges a lot, and that's basically the same kind of technique. I dip it in water, I dab it on my paper towel, and then I go along that edge to soften the edge a little bit. And you can see I got a little splatter on my wash here. I think I will just leave that for now. We'll probably have to do another wash on this guy, and that'll be fine. So now I'm going to move into an area. I'm going to move into the eye because it's not touching anything pink. I'm going to let this stuff dry for a minute, and the eye is actually a very light yellow. And so I'm going to take some of my yellow and really dilute it down. And the thing about eyes is that they are round. And so they have the same kind of lighting that a sphere has. And our eyelids often act as, well, they protect the eye, but they also cast a shadow on the eye too. So when you're looking at your reference photo here, you can probably see where there are shadows. Actually, I will bring this here and we'll see if you can see that. So you can see there are some shadows here and there's some darker shading here. We're gonna do that in our painting today. So first I'm gonna start with a light yellow, and you can kind of see this is what I'm starting with. Oftentimes I will grab a paper and dab on my paper to see how light that color really is. And that I might just add a little bit of water. That's kind of nice to test out try before you buy, so to speak. And we'll just drop that in this eye here. Now, if you feel like you've got too much pigment in there and it's a little too yellow, take your brush, dab your napkin here, and lift. And that can help kind of lighten that. I'm also gonna, while that's gonna dry, I'm gonna move into my blue paint here. And I'm using an ultramarine blue, which any blue will do if that's what you have. This is a really diluted blue color because this guy is in shadow, but he doesn't have any hard cast shadows. And that is not the right blue there. Here, we'll get rid of me for a minute and see if we can't get it so you can see my palette a little better. So you can see this, I'm really diluting this down. And again, this is one of those that you might want to test first because we don't really want it to be obvious that it is blue necessarily. We're going to do this on its beak. We just want a hint. So that might be all right. Now, most watercolors, they dry lighter. I've noticed with my core, I've said this before, my core watercolors, they don't lose their color very much. They are pretty pigmented and pretty nice there. So I'm going to lightly, I'm looking in these areas to see where it kind of feels sort of blue. Like here. If If you want to soften those edges, you just dip your brush in clean water. Just soften them. That's nice. I might add a little extra here because I see if you're working, now I'm working wet and wet, so you can kind of see how that color will pool there. Watercolor is wonderful for these great effects. Gonna make it a little darker here. Okay. All right. So while that's happening, I'm going to move over to the side here. This is the pink feathers, and I'm going to do just a light wash of pink here. So I'm adding some water here. You can see it's diluted, pretty diluted. Now, the point of tonight's lesson is really to have fun. So if you want to veer off the path, feel free to. We're just here to have fun and learn something new. I appreciate you being here. So you can see this is a nice soft pink that I've put down because we have a lot of light here in the feathers. As you can see, it's kind of bleeding into here, but that's okay. If that bothered you, you could always wipe off your brush, run it over, and just lift that. We don't care. We're going to add more to the feathers anyhow, but we're going to add in the dark parts. And you can work wet into wet. I'm probably, I'll show you what that looks like here. You can kind of see how it disperses and creates kind of some really unique texture. And I will probably come back into this area and keep darkening it, but so here it's kind of spread. I can kind of lift here to still create that line a little bit. Okay. And this is lighter here, so I'll just lift that. Okay. So next I am going to, the blue is dry here, so I'm going to mix some Sodalite so we can put that dark part of his or her beak, put that in so it starts really looking like something while you're painting. And I'm going to use two brushes again. Gotta find my thin one here. So you can see I have a really teeny tiny brush here. This might be, I don't know what this is, maybe a 2. All the numbers are off of them. And I'm going to mix some Sodalite. Sodalite is dark, so if you don't have a Payne's gray, maybe you have a black or a really dark blue. So you can see how dark this is here. What I really like about this color is that it granulates a lot. And so if you saw my example, you probably saw a lot of granulation, and mostly that means texture. You'll see when I start painting. And I've got a nice ratio of water to paint here, and we can test it here just to see how dark it might be. So that's a pretty good consistency. So I've got one brush loaded with paint. Now, not everybody paints this way, but I do. Because I want to work fast and I don't want to have a bunch of marks in my paint. So looking at my reference, I'm starting with my smallest brush. Moving the bead a little. You always find out how shaky you are when you have to go into a narrow space. Okay. And there's a little bit of a feather here that's sticking out. So I'm getting my thin brush here, straightening up this line. Cleaning up this line here, I see a tiny hair that is in there. Okay, he's got, I'm gonna clean up this line a little bit. And I can do that because it's still pretty wet and shouldn't leave any marks there. Okay, so now this flamingo is starting to take shape. So we're gonna let that area dry and move on to another area. And I'm gonna go back to the eye now. And there is one color that I think I may have forgotten to put on my list. It's yellow ochre and raw umber. And these are like a light browny color, so maybe you can see in my palette here that is a little yellow ochre. Here is raw umber. It's kind of a yellowy browny color. Okay. So I'm going to define this eye a little bit because as we look at our reference, we have the upper lid. So there's a bit of a shadow there, and I'm just going to dab this because I have a little extra paint there. We'll see how shaky I am again. There we go. And kind of bring it around underneath that eye. It's actually darker kind of in the corner here. So I'm going to dip my brush in water, dab it off here, and then I'm going to go in and kind of soften these edges because it's a round shape. And while that dries, I'm going to kind of work around here on the lid. And if you look at your reference photo, there's not that bright of color, but there's color here on the lid. And oftentimes you can shape something using the negative space, or like here we're going to leave some of the white in certain areas to shape the lid. Just softly do this. Go underneath here. And just help this guy kind of come to life. Let's see. Add in a little bit of that blue in here. And I'm kind of constantly looking at my reference, seeing like where things can be drawn in with the brush and kind of assessing it. We'll just kind of add some more dark there and in the corner here. And you can see it really makes the eyes start to come alive. And now we're going to kind of create that crease that's in the eye here. Probably soften that a little bit. So it's interesting, you know, the last few years, really probably since I got married, and we've lived in Great Falls, Montana for a while, I have just come to love birds. They're just interesting creatures. And when you start noticing them, you can't not notice them, it seems like. Depending on where you are, you know, you could have some amazing birds migrate to your area that you never really notice. So one thing I'm going to do here is mix my hot pink color with a little Sodalite or blue. I'm going to create a little bit of a purple. Can't see that there. This light purple color, kind of in this corner here of the eye. I'm going to just dab that in there. And soften it a little. Okay. And I'm going to take my Sodalite here. And I'm going to actually give him a pupil. Now he's starting to look like somebody, isn't he? Oops. And I'm going to take some color and put it in this kind of nose crease here. Beak crease. What would you call that? I'm pretty stoked. I think not only is my niece tuned in tonight, hopefully, but I have a couple nephews that are, I think, tuned in as well. So welcome. I hope you guys are doing well and having fun in your quarantine. I'm going to just add a little yellow here. And yellow and red makes orange, so this hot pink and this yellow color will mix nicely and create an orange. Okay. So it looks like my Sodalite has dried too. So I'm going to take a little bit of this pink color and I'm going to add it right in here. I'm going to just kind of dilute this down a little bit with a little extra water. Just start painting that in. I'm going to try not to get too mixed with my Sodalite there. Just let it kind of sit on top. And get a little more pigment here because you can kind of watch it bloom. Isn't that fun? and maybe a little here too, around the nose. Okay, so while that is drying, I'm going to go back into the feathers that are here and add some shadows or darker areas that you see from your reference, which means I need to mix a little more pigment here. So I'm mixing some more of this opera pink, this hot pink color. Now, if you're using quinacridone coral or something like that, you don't need to do that. You can use whatever you have too. I'm going to take some of this yellow color here. I need a bigger area here, a bigger mixing area. Okay. So now I'm looking at my reference here, and I'm going to paint in these areas that are darker and leave the lighter areas, just adding more depth to that flamingo. So I have a pretty good size brush. This might be a 5 or a 6. And I'm just going to paint in these areas. These are shadows that the feathers are leaving in the bright sun. Yeah, when we went to San Diego, that's the first time that I've ever actually really been in California and not been in an airport in California, and it was so nice. It, I think, only rained one day while we were there. And we got to see all of the animals at the zoos around. We probably haven't walked that much since then. It was a fun trip. So I've moved down to this smaller brush to fit into some of these areas. Cleaning up some lines here. Just keep looking at my reference. And remember, the goal here is to have fun. So I'm curious to know what you guys are doing while you're in quarantine, how school is going. And are you staying busy? I guess that's the question. Staying out of trouble, staying busy. I find lately that I drag my hand in the paint and drag it across the paper. So hopefully keep that to a minimum. And in some areas where I can see, I can add darker or more pigment and make an area look a little darker. I like to layer paint on top of one another, and what that means really is when it dries, or it's mostly when it's dry, I can go back in and paint over an area and it will just make it doubly dark. And watercolor can be intimidating, but honestly, there are a lot of ways to fix things in watercolor, so don't despair if you have something that doesn't turn out quite how you wanted it to. The beauty of watercolor is it kind of does its own thing in some ways, so just roll with it. Okay, so for now I'm going to let that dry. And this area is still wet. So I think I'm going to go back in, even though I really love the color that this is turning out to be. I'm going to do another wash over the top. And you can't see it, but I moved my paper towel. Now I have some fun speckling going on here. Last week I gave a demonstration on how to work with speckling and make that part of your art. So if you are interested in that, you should check out that video. Okay, so I'm going to mix a little more paint. I feel like I don't have enough here for my whole guy. A little more yellow. I think I got a little too much yellow. It's pretty orange. Can you see that? I'm not sure if my camera quite picks up color sometimes the right way, but we can go with this. Flamingos are kind of an interesting color. And oftentimes there are different varieties of flamingos, as well as, you know, depending on their diet, depends on how pink they are, because I believe their plankton is their food of choice, or shrimp. So, okay, so again, I'm loading a skinny brush and a big brush. And I'm gonna do another glaze over the top here. And you gotta watch your hands so you don't drag them across your page. Just gonna go around this eye, and then I'm gonna start with my big brush. Such a pretty color. And I'm gonna leave that light, I think, in there. Move that bead around. Get some more paint. Notice I'm not dipping in water and then dipping into my paint. That often can have undesirable results. That's why it's important to mix enough paint, because it will change the dilution of your paint. Okay. And let's see. I don't want to do that quite yet. I want to continue this down here. Got to move quick. Okay, now I'm dipping in water. I'm going to soften one of these edges here. See if I can soften this a little. And maybe lighten this area up just a hair. Sometimes you can scrub a little, and then I will. Okay, so now our flamingo is really starting to come alive here. So I think next I'm going to go back into these feathers that are here and just add a little bit more. I will also be using a little bit of my yellow because some of those feathers that are in the light are sort of peachy. And Sally and the beef cracker, your flamingo looks scared. Well, I'm so glad that you're here and you are attempting to do your flamingo. I bet it's beautiful. So I just kind of accidentally mixed some of my paint here, but it makes this really nice kind of orangey peachy color. So I'm gonna try not to make a mess here. I keep getting smudging here. So in my feathers, hopefully you can see that. Can I zoom in a little? I'm just bringing in this color. Giving it a little shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just giving this dimension. And hopefully our flamingos do all right. Andy has gone off script. He looks like something from the Dark Crystal. Oh, I love it. That's okay. That's what using creative license is all about, and that's what you can do here. Again, you know, it's about having fun. If we had to be perfect and do this perfectly, it wouldn't be as much fun. So I'm just here to guide you, and you can do whatever you want. And Andy is my nephew, and he really is pretty artistic. So he probably knows what he should do best. And Sam, my other nephew, is very creative too, but he's more of a guy that's into story and video. And so both those things work hand in hand. They're all about telling stories. So that's pretty fun. I'm really glad you guys tuned in tonight. If we can't see you in person, we can kind of see you from afar. Hang out. Now, if you want to make some of these areas even darker, you can use like an alizarin crimson, which I just mixed so you can kind of see what that looks like. And it will add that extra kind of darkness there. You could also add a blue in there and it will kind of mix a purple. Just have fun with it. Now you can kind of see, let's see, I'll zoom out here. This is what I mean about the splatters from my water. It happens every time I paint. I get excited. Just adds character to your painting, that's all. Okay, so our guy's looking pretty good. I'm going to add some more details. This area is dry, so I'm going to add some light pink, and what you'll see is when I go back over this, you can create some subtle line work with a little bit of diluted paint. And these guys have so much texture on their beak, it makes it kind of fun. Let's put a few lines in there, clean up the edge there. He's got a little dark line here, so with a little blue I kind of have this purpley color. And you know, if you wind up painting outside the lines and you don't want to, you dip your brush into a clean water, and you can see I went off script, as you would say here, and I'm just gonna kind of take my clean wet brush over that area that I don't want, and then I take my paper towel and I just lift, and it cleans that right up. And then what I'm going to do here is just kind of clean up this edge a little, just a hair, and maybe paint in this edge just a hair. And now I'm going to dip into the blue here, and you can see it's very light. It's actually just a very light watered down blue, and these guys have these lines here. Can you see that? I'll zoom in a little. And just kind of define these areas a little bit for fun. Thank you, Kyle. We haven't talked too much about color today. We did in our last video. I'm sticking to a pretty warm palette here. You can see that this area here is cool. Our Sodalite is cool. But that's the great thing about watercolor, is you really can create some subtle lines and with diluted paint. And I feel like this is pretty harmonious because we are using warm colors. So we're using a hot pink, and we're using yellows and oranges. Let's see. Are you still with me, guys? It looks like I might have had a little bit of issues here. Okay, hopefully I'm still on with you here. It looks like I might be having some issues that might not be related to my mic. Isn't that something? Okay, well, hopefully you're still with me. Okay, it looks like I'm still with you. Okay, good. Thanks, Kyle, for letting me know that. It's hard for me to know, you know, I get into painting and then I don't look up, and so what do you think of our flamingo so far? How are you doing with your flamingos? And I could keep painting this guy and darkening him up. You can see in this image here where this core shadow is. This is a core shadow. That is the side that turns away from the light. So you have your light here. Your light source is shooting down this way. And this is a core shadow. So you could continue to do another glaze with a darker color, or just another color, and continue to shape and mold that guy. I kind of like him in his granulation. And well, since I talked about granulation a little bit earlier, I'm going to zoom in here and we'll kind of look at the granulation here. So the Sodalite, it's this texture, and you'll see it in my other paint as well, but it creates this really beautiful texture there. And you can see it here as well. And part of that is mixing those two colors together. Some paints have more granulation than others. Some people like granulation, some people don't at all. So it's a personal preference. I think I enjoy it more now. And so that is why I use certain paints like Sodalite. This one really has a lot of granulation, whereas Payne's Gray has granulation as well, but maybe not as much. Okay. So one last thing we can do here is I'm just going to assess this guy and see. I could continue to do shadows on him and shape him, but I might just add a few more shadows in his feathers that are on this side. And I'm kind of mixing a purple color. Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate your kind words. I think Kyle's my #1 fan. He's always so supportive. And I mean, you can see some of these feathers here. They have a little bit of texture, and you can kind of add that here with a thin brush and make it work to your advantage. This is pretty dark around here. So it just kind of continues to add dimension. I have some shadows here, so I can lightly go over that as well. You could look at this all day and find something new that you didn't see before. And I often think that being able to paint or draw is really, it boils down to the connection between your brain and your brush and your observational skills. Because I think artists notice a lot of things that others don't because they spend so much time looking at stuff. So if you want to be a better artist, I think it comes down to practice and observation, and just keep plugging along. Don't give up. We all have to start somewhere, and it's a fun, good challenge for you. Thanks, Kyle. I see your comment there. Okay. Well, what do you think? You think our flamingo's good? I think I'm going to leave that here for now. If you have questions, please feel free to write in the comments down below. I'd love to answer your questions. And you can leave a comment and I'll answer it after this live session is over. So if you're doing this after the fact, then I definitely will answer your questions. Thank you for tuning in with me today. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I did. I love doing these lives. They're pretty fun, barring any kind of technical difficulties that you might have or I might have. So let's see. If you want to find me in the social web, this is where you can find me. And if you want to see more tutorials like this, just subscribe to this channel because I'll be doing them at least weekly. The lives right now are going to be weekly because we're all stuck in quarantine together, and we might as well be painting and having fun while we're quarantined. And if you liked this video and you think your friends might like it too, go ahead and share it with your friends. I'm here to help facilitate learning for you if you're interested in learning to do watercolor and draw as well. And I don't see any questions down below, so that might end our session for now. I'll kind of hang out because I know there's a bit of a lag here between my computer and the live stream, but thank you so much again for tuning in. I hope you learned something new and had a little fun while you were doing it. Of course, I'll leave these links down below that have these images, and you can download them for coloring or continuing to paint. We didn't paint the little flamingos tonight, but you definitely can do that by downloading that paper. And so, since we don't have any further questions, thanks for tuning in. I will see you next time. Look for me next week. I believe we'll be doing some flowers next week. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.